Welcome back. Today I am joined by Taylor of She's in Sync and Nourished by Tay. She is an absolute expert when it comes to coming off of birth control while naturally supporting your body. And we'll take it back to the beginning of how Taylor and I found each other in the first place. So she actually started as a patient of mine in Columbus, where I first had opened my private practice as an orthopedic and pelvic floor PT. And so getting to work on her own health journey and support her. And now it has all come full circle where we each have our own private practice and our own podcast, and really getting to see the behind the scenes of her starting this journey has been so special. And today I am beyond excited to interview her all about coming off birth control naturally, because it is something that is overprescribed by physicians in today's world. And we know that there are so many detriments that it can have to our body. And if you are wanting to get off, what do you even do? Do you just stop cold turkey, or can we support the body and its minerals to come off of it in a more optimal way? And so that is what we will be diving into today with Taylor. She is a registered dietitian nutritionist. And Taylor, I'll have you give a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, I'm so excited. All right. So yeah, I'm a registered dietitian, and like Dr. Kayla said, originally was a patient of hers. And I originally started my career in eating disorders, and that's because it was fueled by my own personal health journey. I lost my period at 18 years old and was prescribed birth control, and no questions were asked, no deeper digging was done. It was just kind of like, take this pill, you're going to college anyway. Assumptions made about sexual activity and all that. And
Sure.
they're like, just stay on it until you want to get off and become pregnant. So a lot of assumptions there and misinformation and just kind of a lack of understanding of what actually was going on. So what really was going on was I was struggling with an undiagnosed eating disorder. I was under eating, over exercising. And I know that's a big piece of your story too, in terms of like under fueling and that just not being recognized. And that's the reason I lost my period. So I realized I didn't have a healthy relationship with food and my body in college. And that's actually what inspired me to become a dietitian. And I really wanted to help other women improve their relationship with food and exercise. And so I went into the eating disorder space right out of the gate from college. That was something I was really passionate about based on my own healing journey. So I was in there for a really long time, and I thought that's where I was going to stay as a dietitian. I thought I found my niche, my calling, and I loved it for a really big time. And then when I was around 28, I'm 33 now, I was listening to a random podcast, and Alyssa Vitti was the expert on this show, and she was talking all about. Alyssa Vitti is like a women's health expert. She's written a lot of really good books called like In the Flow is my favorite, Woman Code. And she was talking all about how like the negative side effects of birth control and how you're not actually getting a period on the pill. And so here I am, and I'm like really health aware, helping other people improve their health, have a master's degree in nutrition. And my mind was blown. I was like, I have no clue what was happening in my own body. And I almost felt lied to for a really long period of time. And so I went down this rabbit hole of researching and learning all about my own anatomy and how birth control actually impacts the body and how it works. And so after doing that, I made the decision to come off of birth control, and I, not knowing any better, just stopped. And when I went to my doctor, that's what she said. She was like, well, just stop and see if anything happens. And if it does, like, come back. So very reactive approach. So I did. And about 3 to 6 months later, that's when the symptoms hit. And that's typically what I see when people stop. It doesn't happen right away, but something called post-birth control syndrome usually peaks 3 to 6 months afterward. So I struggled with really terrible acne. I was still in the midst of figuring that out when I was working with you. I remember us kind of chatting about that, and really bad anxiety, irregular periods, and no one could help me. I went to my doctor, my dermatologist. The acne was the most distressing symptom for me because it was on my face, and anyone who struggled with chronic skin conditions know it's something. It makes you really self-conscious. It wrecks your confidence. It just impacts your mental health and your physical health too. And so I will never forget when I exhausted all my options for acne. Like, I did all the peels, all the facials, all the spironolactone. I even at my, I really was against doing antibiotics. I knew how it killed off good bacteria, but I did that too. Just, I was desperate. Elimination diets, everything. And when I exhausted all those, my dermatologist just basically shrugged and was like, well, I think you just have to go back on the pill or on Accutane. And I was so frustrated and I felt so unheard. I told her I didn't want to go back on birth control because I knew how it was affecting me and how it made these things worse when I came off and it wasn't actually a solution. But no one could help me. So I left her office and I actually cried because I just felt so defeated and I didn't know what to do. And once that subsided, I was like, okay, I'm going to figure out how to heal my body on my own. And so I started entering the world of functional nutrition. I got specialized training in skin conditions and acne specifically, functional testing. And that's what really opened my eyes to there is this whole other world of root cause healing, which I know you and I are so passionate about, that women don't have to suffer with these things, including acne, painful periods, missing periods. Birth control is overprescribed for those, but it's not getting to the root of the problem and it's making things worse 99% of the time. So I was able to heal my acne naturally, my period, my anxiety is so much better. And that's what really fueled me to change my entire career trajectory from eating disorders to this space where I specifically help women safely transition off birth control and be proactive about it versus reactive. Because if I would have had that support, I wouldn't have had to go through that. I spent 4 years trying to figure it out with zero support. And I'm grateful in retrospect because it's what brought me here to the job that I love and the private practice that I love. But it was horrible for 4 years trying to figure out and feeling like my body was broken. So that's really what I specialize in right now is giving women that really tailored approach with the functional testing to come off birth control without acne, without painful periods, smooth mood, all that kind of stuff.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I remember when I was seeing you in my office and acne was a struggle,
Mhm.
and you opened up to me about that. And that is so challenging as a woman and in general, right? It's a confidence thing, and especially when that hasn't always been the case for somebody. Your skin looks amazing now. So if you have
Yeah.
video on, she has absolutely perfectly clear complexion. And I think when people hear birth control, they simply think avoiding pregnancy, but there are so many factors that come into how birth control affects your overall health
Mhm.
that is very important to consider. And so, Taylor, what are reasons that women decide to come off birth control? Because I know for you, it wasn't because you were ready to try to
Yeah.
conceive. It was more so because of how you were feeling.
Mhm. So my main reason was just to make for sure my period was normalized. And a lot of women, I think there's just more noise around this now, and people are starting to question what we've been told. I think we're in an era which is good. We're just questioning the conventional approaches and realizing, oh, maybe this isn't actually helping, or there's just more information out there for women that we should have been taught a long time ago of how birth control works. So for a lot of women, it is more of, I want to come off and do this naturally. They were put on, I would say, I mean, 99% of my clients were put on it for a reason other than pregnancy prevention. It was to mask
Yes.
painful periods. It was to mask the acne. It was to get their period back, air quotes.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of women, it's like, well, I'm really recognizing that this actually isn't solving the problem. And I want to make for sure, I want to make sure my body's okay. So I work with some amazing women who are just very in tune with their body. They know it's been affecting them. I would say the average client that I work with, they've been on birth control for at least 10 plus years. So they're just ready to come off, whether or not they want to conceive or not. And they want to do things naturally. And then the other percentage, they are, I work with a lot of women who are newly married, they're ready to start families, but they're terrified of coming off because, they were put on for painful periods. So they've kind of been told the story of, well, you're either on birth control and that helps with your periods, or you're off and they're going to be horrible again, which it doesn't have to be the case. If we get to the root cause of that symptom with the functional testing and the root cause approach and the personalized plan, you can transition off, with minimal symptoms because we're actually solving the deeper issue.
Amazing. And that is so, so important because you're right. Women aren't given the full story where a lot of times, it's not because they're trying to avoid pregnancy for the reason they're getting on
Yeah.
it. It is because of acne or because of other issues. And so to just understand there is a different way and we can actually get to the root cause instead of this band-aid approach. So if somebody is listening and they are currently on birth control and they want to come off, what should they do before stopping
Mhm.
birth control cold turkey?
Yeah. So I have what I call like a four-step method for this. The first thing is, figuring out your timeline. So I recommend ideally, in an ideal scenario, I know this might not be realistic for everyone, but ideally prepping your body for 3 to 4 months prior to stopping versus just quitting cold turkey like I did. If you're listening and you already quit and you're at that phase where you're experiencing those symptoms, you are not doomed. Just you're going to be reverse engineering this. That's what I did. So, yeah, figuring out your timeline. And if it's possible, just thinking through, do I have any major life changes coming up? So if you're switching jobs or you're moving or you're going through a really stressful time right now, maybe it's not the best time to come off because that is going to be somewhat of a stressor on your body because your body has to relearn how to make its own hormones. Like it's just undergoing a big shift. So if possible, thinking through your timeline, thinking through, okay, if I have 3 months to do these next phases I'm going to talk about, when would that be? And just thinking longer term with that. The next thing is starting with mineral replenishment, which I know both of us are really passionate about. Minerals run the body, and birth control depletes a variety of vitamins and minerals. And vitamins are important, of course, too, but I really focus on minerals with this process because our body can make some vitamins, but it can't make its own minerals. So we have to be really intentional about getting those through specific food sources as well as like smart targeted supplementation. That's where I really lean on the testing too, because I don't want people to waste money or time buying supplements that they don't need. And a lot of times that's when people are coming to me, they've tried all the things, they've spent so much time, money, and energy on all these supplements and stuff that aren't necessarily working for them because they aren't personalized to their unique biology. So, really targeted mineral replenishment, and then also focusing on healing your gut and supporting your liver because birth control impacts your gut in a variety of ways. It decreases the level of good bacteria in your gut. It encourages the production and life of bad bacteria in your gut, inflammation in your gut, commonly called leaky gut. It's technically intestinal permeability, but that impacts your whole body. Your gut is so important for everything. And then your liver, right? Like if you've been on birth control for a really long period of time, that's a super important detox organ that is very overburdened and might be under functioning, which is why a lot of times, if we can't detox these toxins, even if you live a really clean lifestyle, it just may not be able to do that if it has the added stress of birth control plus all the other things that we're exposed to on a day-to-day basis. So targeted liver support through specific foods, again, targeted supplementation if needed, and just being really mindful of stress throughout the process. I would say those are like the top three things to focus on is the timeline, stress, mineral replenishment, gut healing and support, and liver support.
Now, are you getting labs prior to them coming off birth control to see these baselines?
Yes. So I have different ways clients can work with me, but I include testing in all levels of working with me because as people can already tell, I'm like that's so important to me. And so helpful to have that personalized data. So yeah, with my highest level of coaching, I'm working with them for at least 5 months. And that's because we're doing a deep dive assessment and then we're doing a bunch of different labs that are tailored to their specific symptoms or concerns. So if someone is, their concern is acne and they were put on birth control for acne, we're going to run specific labs to that versus someone with painful periods, we're going to target it to that, to get that information. So we run those labs and then we're going to create a personalized plan to target those underlying balances that were there before birth control or maybe came up when they were on birth control based on its mechanisms. And that's going to really help them have a smooth transition off versus if we didn't run that lab data before and more after, that's when they're probably going to have symptoms and it's going to be more of a reactive approach.
Yeah, so let's dive into the reactive approach then. So the person listening has already cold turkey stopped birth control and they're about 5 months out from that and they're starting to notice these flares of cystic acne and mood swings and the such. So, what should they do now?
Yes, ideally testing if you can. If you cannot do personalized testing, and let me pause and say with the testing too, these are the labs that I'm running, and we can go into as much or as little detail as you think would be helpful for listeners, but the labs I'm running are not going to be the labs your doctor is going to run or your dermatologist is going to run. They're going to run your standard CMP. Like it's not going to give you very much information. We're going deep with the labs that I have. Like we're doing comprehensive blood labs, and I'm looking at them also from a functional perspective of what's optimal for women's health versus what is normal or what's normal until we flag a disease state. So that's really, really huge is running the right labs, but then also having someone looking at it from the perspective of women's health and your specific goals and symptoms. Because I, you know, I can relate to this from a personal angle and then just talking to my clients and women in my life of they feel like absolute garbage, but they go to the doctor and they're like, oh, your labs are normal. Like, we don't see anything wrong. It's fine. And that can be so invalidating and so frustrating because and then you start to think like, well, maybe this is just how I'm supposed to feel, or maybe this is just normal. And it's not, so you have to have the right person running your labs and then also looking at it of like what's optimal for your health versus just flagging, your liver being overburdened when it has like liver disease or something. So yeah, running those right labs. And then the other thing is like a comprehensive stool test, because like I said, that's so, so important to looking at the state of the gut. That impacts your mental health, your digestive system, obviously, your mineral status, because if you're consuming a lot of minerals, but you aren't properly absorbing them in your gut because you have overgrowth or you have like a weak gut immune system, for example, then that's going to impact everything too. So we have to take a whole body approach as well, which is why I do a bunch of different labs and have that really, personalized approach to it, in addition to the mineral testing, in addition to, looking at like copper, for example. That's something that is so tied to mental health. And when women are on birth control, it actually rises your copper levels. So women who have like PMS, anxiety, and again, they've kind of just been told like, well, just take an antidepressant for that. Like, that's fine. I'm not against that at all. Like, I am and have been on anxiety medication throughout my life. And at the same time, there's deeper root causes to that. So figuring out like what's the root cause here, and like no doctor is running a copper test on someone. Like they don't know why I would ask for that. But that's one of the labs that I run that is really specific to women who have anxiety and depression and mood disorders or mood swings who have been on birth control.
And what to do with that information. So,
Yeah.
from your perspective, then, as a dietitian nutritionist, so are you leading with food first? Are you looking at supplements first, a combination of both? How does that approach work?
Yeah. So I always will be at heart the dietitian who is always food first. Food is medicine, and I want people to be able to enjoy food too. With my background working with eating disorders as well, I'm just really passionate about food. Yes, it's medicine, but it also is so much more than that. It's cultural, it's enjoyment, it's a hobby for some people. So a lot of women come to me and they're under eating and they're like clean eating. Like they really are trying to clean up their diet to be healthier, and they've been told that will help with their acne or their mood or whatever. So I see a lot of women who are under eating. So I work a lot with women of trying to get their nutritional intake up. And then once we get those labs back, we can have that extra layer of, okay, like let's add some sulfur rich foods to help support liver detoxification. Let's add some polyphenols and resistant starches to help with that good gut bacteria. Let's incorporate more magnesium rich foods because you're really deficient in magnesium. So always it will be food first. And because there are usually so many deficiencies with my clients when they're first coming in because of prolonged birth control use and possibly under eating or diet history, or, stress is a huge mineral depleter too, and our food system just isn't as rich in minerals, for example. We do, again, I call it smart supplementation. I'm not someone who's going to just give people a ton of supplements. That is not ethical, in my opinion, and that's not sustainable, and that's not actually a root cause approach. But really leaning into, okay, like what supplements do we need the most of right now? And I always will give my clients like a graduation protocol too of like, here are supplements to continue. And then a lot of those we can offboard and switch to foods once they're repleted. And then we'll also focus on lifestyle too, because if you're stressed and your nervous system is always in fight or flight, we can do all the nutrition stuff, all the supplements, but if you're still like burning through that and or your body doesn't feel safe to heal, then we're just kind of running on a hamster wheel. So I really take a holistic approach with that. And, we'll also refer out if someone needs more specialized nervous system support, or if someone needs to see a therapist, or if someone needs some additional help in a different area. But it's so, so important to know that there's so many different facets to this. It's not just like one size fits all or like a magic bullet solution.
Totally. And that's something I focus on a lot with my patients is the nervous system side of things
Yep.
because you're so right. If somebody's always in fight or flight mode and they're, overly stressed, the cut's not going to heal.
Yeah.
And if their goal truly is trying to conceive, in part with coming off birth control, if that is a goal of theirs, well, if the body doesn't feel safe, they're not going to heal and it's going to be very challenging to conceive and maintain a pregnancy. So,
Yep.
in your expertise for women who are coming off birth control and have a goal of trying to conceive, how long before trying to conceive should they come off birth control?
Yeah, great question. Because I actually just was talking to a new client this month about that. So I told her, I first ask people, right? Like, I ask, like, do you have a timeline for when you want to conceive? Are you like kind of just starting to think about it? Are you like, I want a baby by this time next year, ideally? So I will always ask them because we can work on any timeline, right? It's just what's ideal might be a little bit off of that. But once they say that, most of my clients are kind of like, I trust you, like whatever you suggest. So I, again, will go back to like, ideally, I think we should do 3 to 4 months of prep work to get you off birth control. And because that's what I've seen in over, a year and a half of doing this at this point. Like that's what I've seen to be the most effective for that smooth transition off. And then once they're off of that, we kind of assess how are you feeling. We'll do some retesting oftentimes just to see, compare analysis of like what their labs look like before, in addition to how they're feeling too. And then we'll say, okay, like let's start trying. And, usually that's a much smoother process versus just stopping and then struggling with that fertility piece. So roundabout way of saying about 3 to 4 months ideally.
So, 3 to 4 months after stopping birth control?
Oh, okay. So 3 to 4 months of prep work, then stopping. And then I honestly say you can start trying after that.
Okay. Okay.
Because
I gotcha.
yeah, because we've been doing that deeper work to heal those imbalances. It might take some time. I mean, again, your body is relearning how to produce its own hormones. We aren't working on that piece necessarily because your hormones are in flux with birth control on the pill or the IUD. But we've set them up. We've kind of been doing that. I like compare it to like marathon training, which you're like a runner, right? Or you used to run? Yeah.
Yep.
I don't. So if I were to just be like, I'm running a marathon tomorrow, like I could do it, but it's going to be awful and I'm probably going to hate every single minute of it. Versus if I was like 3 months ago, I'm going to train for this marathon and I'm going to be, I'm going to do some weightlifting. I'm going to work up to running that distance. It's going to be so much of a smoother process. So it's the same thing with coming off birth control. If you just quit right away, your body is in flux and it's like, what the heck is going on here? Versus if you streamline that and you are working it out and you're getting your system ready for it, your hormones are going to have a much more balanced result comparatively if it stops, you stop, and then they're kind of all over the place figuring things out.
That's very interesting because I've heard different timelines for this. So it's great to hear your perspective. But I have heard for those who stop cold turkey to wait 6 months for your hormones to normalize before trying to conceive. Now, that's not to say they for sure will normalize in 6 months
Yeah.
because you may be in flux and you may need extra support like Taylor is describing. But the analogy to training for a marathon certainly makes sense. If we prepare the body beforehand, it's going to be that smoother transition. And if your cycles do come back regular right away, then potentially you could try to conceive. Do you recommend if somebody has time on their side, giving it 3 to 4 months post coming off birth control to then focus on remineralization of the body without birth control as part of it, and then trying to conceive?
I think that's like icing on the cake. I think that's
Yeah.
like a really good bonus if you have time on your side, like you said. And because we've already been doing that for 3 to 4 months, ideally, like even though you're on birth control, we're still like optimizing that a lot. So that's where I say, you can start right away. But of course, we can't guarantee like your body's gonna be ready. That's where we just kind of have to see. But yeah, I think that's a great bonus if you want to wait additional 3 months, choose to really focus on that when you don't have that birth control depleting that, to just have an added benefit of that.
For sure, for sure. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Mhm.
Now, biologically, what is happening with birth control? Why do women see these huge spikes in issues when they come off of birth control?
Yes. Okay. Love this question because this is something we're not taught, which is crazy. Like,
Yes.
so birth control works, and I'm going to speak mostly to the pill here because there's different IUDs and they work like a little bit differently. But with the birth control pill, because that's the one I see when the most on who that's pretty much like the standard one of like go on the pill and then if they have issues that's when sometimes people go to like the hormonal IUDs. But your birth control pill is how it works is it like flatlines your hormones. So as women, when we're not on birth control, we're going to have natural ebbs and flows in our hormones. That's, people have probably heard of like cycle syncing and all that. That's really playing off of that natural rhythm that we have in that 20-ish 8-day cycle as women. But when you're on birth control, it really flatlines everything. And it also, because of that, turns off ovulation, which ovulation is when you're actually getting a period, like a real period. I don't know why I did air quotes, people watching me, a real period. I'm used to saying period. Um, you're having a real period when you're ovulating because your progesterone, which is the major player for ovulation, is doing its thing. But when you're not ovulating, you're having that bleed, but it's not an actual period. And fun fact, I learned this from Alyssa Vitti's book, but birth control manufacturers, women were so disturbed when birth control came out that they weren't bleeding on birth control. That's why they created those sugar pills to have that artificial bleed to make people feel like they're having a period on it, but they're not ovulating. Therefore, you're actually not having a period. And that's one of the things that like grinds my gears so much when I hear people propagating like, oh, you're on your period. Like I remember I was at my gynecologist's office and like those walls are paper thin, right? Like you can hear everything that's going on in the other room. HIPAA doesn't exist there. So the nurse came in and was asking, she was like, how's your period? Like, blah, blah. The girl answered. And then she's like, so how's your birth control going? And I'm like, she's not having a period. It's like a little thing for other people that are probably like, why are you so up in arms about this? But this goes back to my own story of like, I was put on it to get a period, but like I went 10 years of my life thinking I was, but I wasn't, So it's just, I feel like one of those misinformation things that women believe. And that's where I think more women are recognizing like, oh, I'm not having a period. There's more talk about that. And I think women are listening to that and they're like, that's not natural. That's kind of weird. Like, let's figure out if there's a different way to do this.
Yes, that is wild. And you're right. We're not told about all of those side effects. And
Mhm.
we think about this in terms of bone health and longevity. A woman's cycle and signs of fertility are very important to our overall health.
Yeah.
And so, if that is fake and it's not a true ovulation and a true bleed, then that is impacting our overall health and well being. It goes far beyond solely fertility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always tell people too, like, I'm very upfront, like, I'm not against birth control at all. I think it's a great option that we have as women. I think it's an important decision that's very personalized. And I just want women to have more of the facts. I want them to be able to make that informed decision versus just take this pill for this ill and like not actually know what it's doing to their body long term. Like that's my big thing. I want informed consent so that women can make that decision for themselves, whatever that option is.
Now, as a woman's true cycle returns and she is looking for signs of fertility, what should she be keeping her eye out for? Should she be tracking her cycle in a certain way? What recommendations do you have
Yeah.
there?
So I love the fertility awareness method. You and I have talked about this, and it's the biggest things to track for this are going to be your basal body temperature. So your temperature right in the morning, because you can track that natural ebb and flow of your temperature with your hormone shifts to see when you're ovulating, right? And then also your cervical mucus. So that, I was just talking with a client yesterday about this of, these are things that we just don't hear about and we aren't taught, but this is our body's biofeedback to us of like, hey, like you're in a healthy place, your hormones are doing what they're doing. So, really looking into tracking those things and starting to see patterns of that to see when you're ovulating or not is super helpful because then you know when to try for a baby versus when you're not ovulating. So you just have more of that data too, and you feel more empowered of knowing what's going on in your body versus just trying and not, conceiving, because you may not be trying at the right time of the month, or your hormones might not be where they need to be right now. And that gives us information too of what we need to shift or focus on.
Absolutely. And if you're not trying to conceive yet, then you avoid that fertile window time
Exactly.
of
Yep.
where you see that rise in cervical mucus, et cetera. So the fertility awareness method, and there are different aspects to this. There's the Marquette method, there is FEM, there's different nuances to it, but they all come back to the same principle of we are tracking your own biomarkers and our own body's fertile signs. And then you can track them. There's a number of apps that you can use, or some people like pen and paper graphs, but the apps are very convenient because it's just with you on your phone wherever you are. And then that starts after 3 to 4 months, it starts to get to understand your cycle and predicts that fertile window for you, which is really, really helpful.
Hmm. Yeah, and there are coaches out there that help women with that. So if this is all like Greek to you, like it was to me and to most of my clients, there are coaches out there who like that's what they do. Like they help you do that. They help you feel confident in it, whether you want to conceive or not. You can utilize them too for some support with learning that and learning how to read that information.
Absolutely. I have a fem instructor coming on the show soon, and we actually have a natural family planning workshop for specific to postpartum. So if you have questions about this, DM me at Dr. Kayla Borchers. I'm happy to provide you resources that I have directly or other providers who can
Yeah.
deep dive into this. I also break it down in my preconception course. So holistically well preconception teaches you how to track your cycle for fertility or for postponing that fertile
Yeah.
window if you're not quite trying to conceive yet, if you're still prepping your body. So lots of helpful resources out there for you, and I'll drop some of those in the show notes. Now, Taylor, as we kind of wrap up here, what is one piece of encouragement you want to leave women with as they consider or begin this journey of coming off of birth control, or if they've already come off birth
Hmm.
control, what is something front of mind?
Yeah. The biggest thing I want women to know is that it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be a nightmare. Your symptoms don't have to come back. Really remembering how birth control works. Hopefully you have a better understanding of that if you didn't know that already, but it's not getting to the root of your problem. So the biggest thing you can do to protect yourself from that or reverse that if you've come off and you're experiencing symptoms is to do that functional testing, to work with a provider who takes a holistic approach and looks at the full body and labs and customizes it to you. So getting that data from your body and then having a customized plan to rebalance and recalibrate is going to be so important and so helpful. And that will, again, my whole thing too is empowerment of like empowerment and understanding of how your body works and knowing that you're not broken, you're not destined to have painful periods or you're not destined to have acne. You just need the right approach and the right support in order to figure out what's going on and to heal that.
Absolutely. Taylor, where can listeners connect with you and learn more about She's in Sync?
Yeah. So, yeah, my podcast is She's in Sync, and I post every week on there. And then I'm most active on Instagram. So, at Nourished by Tay is my Instagram. And then I'll drop my website below in the show notes too for anyone who's interested in that. As well as I do want to put a plug. I have a free breakup with birth control masterclass, which is really a deeper dive into those 4 steps I talked about above or before. About how to transition off birth control, what to focus on. I have some real life case studies in there as well. So if you're a little bit curious or this conversation got you thinking like, oh, I had no clue, like there was a right or wrong way to come off, that's a great free resource for you to check out as well.
Amazing. We will drop all of this in the show notes. Definitely take that free workshop. Taylor is a wealth of information, and it's been so cool to see her entire journey unfold and to now get to learn from her as a fellow guest expert on the show. So if you found this episode helpful, please take a moment to subscribe and leave a review. It truly helps other women find this important information. And if you're preparing for this transition or looking to optimize your cycle health, check out all of our resources in the show notes, a holistically well preconception program from me and Taylor's resources, all surrounding breaking up with birth control. These are designed to walk you through this life season. Thank you for listening. And until next time, remember that thriving should be the new normal.